I know coffee drinking, etc., and networking is very important, but we like to start in just 5 minutes, so please be seated. So I kindly ask you, and take your coffee with you, of course. That's no problem at all. Ik heb de andere microfoons heb ik daar liggen. Andere microfoon voor mijzelf.
Ja, die had ik daar.
Ja, klopt, dank je. Please be seated, ladies and gentlemen, and leave some seats in the back row open for people who come a little bit later. So we have 3 wings, one in the middle, one in the left, and one at the right. So please join us also at the left side and leave the back seats open for people who are a little bit delayed. And take your... Sorry, Peter, that's already taken, but I have a seat for you over there. Take a seat, ladies and gentlemen, and leave the last row open. Here at the left side, for you right, probably, there are still a lot of seats available, but please leave the last row open for people who are a little bit late. I have one announcement. I don't know if somebody in this audience has a Renault, a grey one, with the license plate RH221V. The lights are out already? Okay, I already announced this earlier, so that helped. Thank you so much. So, everybody seated? I think so. A warm welcome on behalf of the Dutch and the European Association of Universities. They join forces together because are we going to make a revolution in the field of recognition and awards? Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Maria Henneman. I'm your moderator of the day. I am also supervisor in the supervisory board of the Radboud University and the Radboud University Medical Center. And also one of the chairs of Zonenway, which is for a fund for healthcare and research science. So then you know a little bit of my background. You are the lucky ones, because although we have some seats available, there were so many people interested in this conference that we have a live stream. So also people from the live stream, hello from us here in Rotterdam in the Maas Silo. And we will have a lot of discussion today. In the afternoon we have a lot of sessions where you can put all your critics and positive remarks, of course. And I hope in the plenary session afterwards we have some input for that too. And I also will ask you, and that's why you need your smartphone later in this morning. We use also the Mentimeter, menti.com, but I come back to you then later. And of course we use Twitter, so you can use your smartphone all the time, but please listen also. And our hashtag is, that's always a problem. If you're always on the smartphone, you don't listen very well. Hashtag recognition and rewards is the hashtag we use. So spread the news today, of course. Maybe we are getting trending. I'd like to introduce somebody from the Alpha Gamma and somebody from the Betas. And they had to work together the last couple of months. And they said, that went very good. Well, let's see of Rianne Letchert and Frank Bayens. Please join us. Because they are the patrons of this conference. Rianne is a professor in international law and rector at the University of Maastricht. Frank is from the University of Eindhoven, the University of the Technology. Oops, I have to get away from the... and he is a professor in biomechanics. So, and you are male, female, so really opposite. But please come a little bit in the light, otherwise we can't see you. And I give you the floor.
The screen.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Is my microphone working?
Yes.
Very good. Good morning, dear colleagues, dear partners. We are so happy that you are all here this morning. This is an historical moment for us. And not only because I'm working with this technical guy, we have many more differences.
Yeah.
For instance, Frank likes images and I like words. So you also have images on your position paper and you have words. So that was the compromise. So we actually are the perfect example of how teamwork can actually be effectuated. I think that's for sure. But why is this such an historical moment? We have worked quite hard the last, let's say, 2 years to draft a position paper in which we are proposing a fundamental change of the way that we reward and recognize our academic staff. And we managed to get all the 14 universities to support that. So that's 14 executive boards. And there are often 3 persons in an executive board, so you can calculate that it's quite difficult to get that support. But it was, to our surprise maybe, relatively easy to get all of your executive boards of the Dutch universities on board. And not only the universities, but also the funding organizations, our NWO and ZonMW. They have been quite instrumental also in supporting our endeavor, of course also looking at their own policies in the field of their research policies, and joining us in finally coming up with a position paper. And also the NFU, that represents the medical schools, at some point approached us and said, we want to be part of this change because we have also concerns on the way that we are now currently rewarding and recognizing our academic and medical staff. And the KNW, so that's the Dutch Royal Society, at some point also came. It also was voluntarily, that was quite nice to see. And there was no power or pressure needed. Came and finally joined us in this position paper. They're all mentioned here on the screen. You have the paper in your possession, so today you also have some time to read it. Now, to have a position paper in your hand is one thing, but to have it implemented throughout our organization is the second thing. And that is, of course, our big assignment and maybe challenge for the coming 2 years, because we need to make sure that all of our colleagues realize and acknowledge the importance of this step, and will also use the position paper in the way that they are on a daily basis evaluating their staff. So that's the next phase, and we'll come back to that in a second. Today, we would like to engage into a dialogue with all of you to get your input in order to make the whole framework that we are going to develop much more concrete. So we need your brains, we need your contribution. Also, if you're critical or if you have concerns, there is still a lot that needs to be designed, so it's not for nothing. We really still need all of you to join us and to work along with us.
Yeah. So what is it that we would like to achieve? We all want to perform excellent research, outstanding education, want to have an impact on society, and perform beautiful patient care. But can we ask that of each individual scientist to excel in all these domains? Most likely not. But I also don't think that's really necessary. If we would enable a bit more diversification in the career paths that we have within the institutes, we could have beautiful performance, outstanding performance in each of these domains. It's also important, I think, to realize that at least in the academic centers that we have, there's a true connection between research and education. So from that point of view, any academic career should be based on a solid performance in education and research. And on the basis of that, we can have certain differentiations and excellence in the other domains, if you like. But it's important that we keep the connection between the two. At least that's the position that we have within the Dutch university system. You can also sense that there is a willingness to change. In a recent survey, and Ruth Graham knows about it, it was shown that 60% of our faculty feels that we should reward education much more than we do today. So there is an understanding within our institutions and among the faculty that a change like this makes sense, and I think we're at the right time right now to make this happen. So yeah. Yeah, the first one was still mine, and then you go for the second.
Oh,
we just
okay.
had a...
It's totally different on my sheet. No,
Is it
you
true?
go. No, you go. You go. We were going to improvise.
No, so the... we just had it. So that this calls for a diversification, but also a more dynamic way of having a career. If someone would like to take a temporary position as a department head, say for 4 years, and the individual gets punished for this in a research evaluation, people are less willing to take up those responsibilities. So to create some dynamics in the whole system, there are people that having, for instance, a part of their career outside of academia, and they return to academia, that should be enabled. So a more dynamic sort of career path is one of the things that we would like to achieve as well, next to the diversification.
Yes, so we also would like to see much more of a balance between the individual contributions of our academic staff and what they contribute to the team. And that's what is mentioned also in the paper, this concept of team science. It not only relates to the work that you jointly do in your lab or in your research group, no, it's also about the work that you do in education, in management roles, in working groups for your faculty or for your university. And those contributions are often not acknowledged in your assessment interviews. We still mainly focus on your research output, but we would like to see in the evaluations that we do with our staff that also those group contributions that are very important, and actually we all are surviving by our staff that do the extra step in all these other, sometimes and often, administrative tasks. And that group contribution should have a role in also your career prospects. So balance between individual assessments and your contribution to your team, your faculty, or your university.
We've all signed DORA, or are about to sign DORA, but do we live accordingly? Do we still count publications? Do we still look at the H-index and so forth? So having a real focus on the quality and the content of the work rather than the quantification of the work is something that we need to implement.
In the position paper, you will also find some remarks with regard to the whole transition to open science. And what we now hear from our colleagues is that they say we are asked to also show that we are willing to go along with this transition, but we're not really enabled to do so, or we are not recognized when we do so. And it takes an extra step as well. It takes extra work to go along with that transition. So we would like to see also that those academics that are making this extra step towards open science are acknowledged for their work. That means the ones that make the big data sets, that maintain the data sets. So have also a different lens in viewing the contributions in order to make it possible that we will reach the open science objectives that we have set. And I think that's very important, not only for Dutch academia, but I think globally, that we make steps towards achieving that. So that is for us also quite an important aspect, that if we want that, then also acknowledge the academics that go along with that.
And finally, we need to develop outstanding academic leadership at all stages of a career. It really starts at the very early stages where you're actually supervising a number of students or PhD students and having a department and then a faculty and so forth. So you need to have academic leadership develop it throughout a career of an academic.
Now, we all know that there are many interdependencies in our system. And that's also why I think it is really quite a success that we were able to get all the partner organizations on board. Because if we, within the universities, change the system, and our funding organizations will still do the same, then the behavior of our colleagues will not change, because we also tend to adjust our behavior with a view to get access to funding. So I'm really very thrilled that also the funding organizations in the Netherlands have said we want to have more calls that stimulate team science. We want to look at the narratives in a CV and not ask for the H index. I can give you many examples. They're also in the position paper of what the funding organizations are going to do, because only together we can make this fundamental change. So that is what we mean with the interdependencies, and that we have to take these into account and jointly make this transition possible.
It's essentially also a behavioral change, because scientists together make the entire system. We're all part of NWO, SONAWay, etc. We're part of the university. So it's something that we need to do throughout the organization. So it's not something there's no easy fix, if you like. It's something that we need to discuss deep in all the organizations and get the interest of all the scientists along these lines.
Yes, and of course we realize that there are large differences between the academic disciplines. And that's also why we said that in the coming 1.5 to 2 years, all the universities will set up a university committee that will further have a discussion within their institutions, within the different faculties, on how we will implement the principles that we put forward in order to also acknowledge and take into account these differences. And I think that's also where you as academics play an important role in your institution to make sure that it's implemented in a way that it aligns also with your scientific discipline.
And clearly we cannot do this in splendid isolation. Suppose that we make the significant change in the Dutch system, but subsequently we have to go to the European system to get the grants. So the whole system, one way or the other, needs to be adjusted to this. So I'm very thankful that there are so many European representatives today from all sorts of countries, because I think if we have this momentum, then we can make a change throughout Europe. That will take time, we understand that, but we clearly should be careful that we are not making these changes in the Netherlands and thereby basically putting ourselves in a disadvantaged position.
Mm-hmm. So what are the next steps after today? As Frank already said, we need a change also of culture. And what we hope is that with the position paper in your hand, you will go back to your institutions and you start also already now the dialogue with your head of department, the director of your institute, your dean, your executive board, but they're already on board, so you can skip that part. And make sure that this movement that comes from the top, and honestly also much supported by younger generations, make sure that we make the pressure be really felt also in the middle management of our institution. So I think that is what we all need to do together.
So we clearly need to redesign our academic career paths to enable this change, which calls also for a change in the Dutch system, UFO, if you like. That is the framework that we have to do the assessments. So what does it take to make an assessment, say, of education? What kind of assessment are we going to make on impact? What does it mean? What does it mean if you have excellence in impact or excellence in education? We have a pretty good feeling what excellence in research means, but how to do that in the other domains. Mm-hmm. Now, there's certain ideas about that, but we need to implement and discuss that within each of the universities. And there will be local flavors to that as well. And as Rian already mentioned, there are some differences between the disciplines as well.
We need to stop? Still have time?
We're running out of time.
Yeah, almost. Ah, that's the sign. When the chair comes, you need to hurry up. Well, of course, we need to work even harder to get to a rigorous implementation of the DORA principle. VSNU already signed that many years ago, and also NWO, and also many of the individual institutions. But now we need to make steps to implement it. And also NWO has set some concrete steps in the position paper, what they will do in the coming 1 to 2 years.
Yeah. It's really a system-wide effort. I think that's very important that we do that. Just to keep it short.
Yeah, well, the reason why you're all here is that we really feel that it is time to open up the dialogue to a much larger group. We've had roundtable conferences in the last year with some of you who are also here in the audience, but we need to move forward. So what we want from you today is to hopefully be able to support what we are doing, also be critical. As I said in the beginning, share your concerns also in the breakout sessions and also later. We're very easy to find, both in our institutions, online, social media, whatever, so that we can make sure that this becomes more than a paper plan, but something that will change our academic system to the positive. And I will tell you one more thing and then I'll stop. Wednesday we had some press releases with regard to the position paper, and I've received several emails from colleagues who said, I'm so sorry that you're coming this late because I already decided to leave academia. And besides the very positive messages, that's also the group why we're doing this, because many of our talents leave academia because they feel so much pressure in performing in all these different domains, but not being recognized for what they do. So help us in this endeavor, and we hope you have a wonderful day, an inspirational day. Thank you very much for coming here today. Oh.
Thank you.
You both were talking about different career paths and a loss of academic friends and people who were at the academy. But do we need then different professional functions?
No, I don't necessarily think so. Like I said before, an academic career, so a scientific career, should be based on a solid performance in research and education. And that's, I think, also clearly stated.
So there has to be, they are inseparable, also in your new system.
I think they are inseparable.
Education and research.
The way we perceive it, at least in my institution, again, many of my colleagues see it the same way. That's what we do. We educate people. It's the most important thing that we do. But we use research to advance our knowledge. It's also one of the obligations that we have. And having this connection between research and education, I think, is one of the cornerstones of the Dutch university system.
But
Exactly.
But comes always. We also would like to award those colleagues who are performing outstanding in the educational work that they deliver. And now what you see is that the career perspectives for those colleagues of us is really poorer compared to those that focus strategically only on their research output. So we need to have a proper balance.
But can you give us an example what you mean by more recognition?
Well, we will hear from Ruth Graham. She has designed a beautiful model through which you can recognize various steps in a career of an academic who is performing as an educational innovator. Well, she will explain the whole system. And I think there are many ways to do that. And what I hear now often is that our colleagues say, it's actually not so wise to focus so much on education, because if I focus more on my research, I know I get promoted. And that's what we don't want, because we have a societal assignment that is more than only doing research. We are also there to perform in our education or in impact, and the same in our academic leadership roles. So it's about finding the proper balance, and what I think is important is to look at talents that people have and their strengths, instead of now asking everyone to do a little bit the same in order to get to the top.
Questions in the audience at this moment? Maybe we can have a little bit more light in the audience, because we hardly can see you. I don't see any fingers at the moment. So I will thank you both. And an applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
This conference is together with the European University Association, so I'd like to introduce to you Brecht Sanen. He speaks Dutch perfectly. He had a career in Brussels, but educated in EU studies, and nowadays he's a policy and project officer of the EUA. And Brecht, I'd like to give you the floor. And please be aware that you are a little bit in the light because of the live stream.
Okay. Can everyone can hear me? Okay, thank you for that introduction. I'm Lse Changemakers from the European University Association, and I'd like to start just by thanking VSNU for bringing together today what I think is a very timely discussion on recognition and rewards. And I'd like to also particularly thank VSNU for engaging EUA to have that national discussion be informed with the state of play in Europe. And that's what I'd like to do for the next 10, 15 minutes, is to present to you the information we've gathered and shared in the last year of what is the state of play on research assessment across Europe. What right now is how we incentivize and reward researchers. Let's see. Just a quick introduction. What is the European University Association? We are a representative organization of universities. We gather the national rectors conferences, including VSNU, and the universities with about 850 members. And we do two things. By and large, we provide an independent voice for the universities. Anytime a decision is made at the European level, national level, we try and support the voice of universities. And also we provide an expertise and a forum of exchange on topics that matter and are relevant for the universities, such as research assessment. We work on many different topics, including learning and teaching, doctoral education, research and innovation. But today what I want to talk about is our work on research assessment. Now, the reason we work on this is because we see very clearly that the landscape in higher education and research and innovation in Europe is changing, and it's changing fast. It was already in the introduction mentioned the momentum we see in open access, making it openly available of publications and data. This is a real momentum across Europe. We see that the digital transformation is impacting the way learning and teaching is being done. So we see a very quickly, rapidly changing landscape. And that presses us to review how we incentivize and reward researchers. It presses us to think and reflect, as we're doing today, on what are the proper incentives and rewards to make sure that researchers are able to take part in that transition to open access and open science in general. Restoring parity and respect to learning and teaching, promoting a broader range of academic activities. It's a very timely discussion to reflect on how we do this, given this changing landscape. What we did in the last year, based on this, is we went out and we asked, not just our membership, but universities in general in Europe, we asked them, what is now the state of play? How do you incentivize and reward researchers? We went out and asked them questions that we were interested in getting a clear and comprehensive answer to. And we were very happy with the result. We had 260 responses across 32 European countries, including 6 from the Netherlands. And to give you a very quick idea before I go to the results, what type of universities responded to this survey, you can see here on the left, by and large, these were comprehensive institutions, institutions that offer almost all of the disciplines, or all the disciplines. And as you can see on the right, these are institutions of a certain size. 44% told us we have more than 1,000 full-time equivalent researchers working at our institution. So comprehensive institutions of a certain size, those are the 260 institutions that filled out this survey. Now, I only have about 10, 15 minutes, so I cannot give you all the results, the richness of the results of this report, but I can give you a couple of key snapshots of the results that I hope will inform the discussion today. The first snapshot I want to give you is autonomy. We asked universities, how do you perceive your own autonomy to develop and implement your approach to research assessment? And you see quite clearly that highly autonomous, mostly autonomous for those different purposes. Universities perceive themselves as quite autonomous. We have a real say in how we implement our approach to research assessment, how we develop that approach. For careers in research, performance evaluation of research units, internal allocation of funding, universities told us with these questions, yes, we perceive ourselves to be quite autonomous. We have a real say in this. But that is not the entire story. We followed this up with a couple of open questions. We asked them, could you give us more information? You perceive yourself as quite autonomous, but what else is going on? What do you take into account when you are developing your approach to research assessment? And obviously I can't show that in a slide, but the open questions told us that universities say research funders and governments, these are our partners in developing how we approach this. Again and again in the comments, these are our main partners. And I believe this already shows you why this event is such a great approach to this, to not just bring universities together, but very explicitly include research funders, have the government present as well, because this will be a dialogue between these partners if you want to make real changes. We've seen that quite clearly from the survey. One other thing that came out of these open questions also was, beyond research funders and governments as partners, was what we've called in the report the competitive environment. Universities are also quite open and clear about there is a very competitive environment in research and innovation, and we take that into account. We feel that pressure. And there's explicit references throughout to university rankings, for example. This is something that should be part of that discussion because this is something universities take into account. So that is our first snapshot to influence the discussion. Second snapshot is research assessment itself. We asked, what type of academic activities do you acknowledge, do you take into account most in your approach to research assessment? And on this slide, green is universities telling us this is very important. Blue is this is unimportant or of little importance. And you quite clearly see immediately up there research publications and attracting research, external funding. Universities tell us this is, for research careers, what we take into account most. What is encouraging, though, is that you see there's a lot more green on this slide. Clearly, research publications, funding, attracting funding, these lead the pack, but there is a large section there of more than 50% of universities saying these other categories are also important to us. It is not just publications, not just attracting funding. There is a basket of other categories of academic activities that are also important. That is obviously research impact, teaching activities, research collaboration. It is a more diverse field than just the top two. So that is already encouraging. One exception, perhaps, you see at the bottom end there is the blue that jumps up when you ask about open science and open access. Universities tell us in terms of incentivizing and rewarding individual researchers for their careers, this is not something right now we take into account. It's about as many universities you can see that say this is very important, that say this is unimportant, of little importance. So that is a second snapshot. A third snapshot is we were interested then. So these are the academic activities that universities tell us they take into account most. But how do you evaluate that? What are the evaluation practices that are being used? And then we got this result. How do you evaluate those academic activities? And there, the difference between what is important, green, and unimportant, blue, is a bit more stark. You see that publication metrics and peer review clearly lead the pack. Almost all universities say, okay, this is something we use, clearly. Then open science and open access indicators, alt metrics, other metrics, you see that these are largely considered unimportant by universities. The difference between the top and bottom is a bit more stark in evaluation practices. Now, I want to be clear about what I'm saying here. I am not saying that universities do not believe that, for example, open science and open access is unimportant. We know from previous surveys that 62% of universities in Europe right now have an open access policy. Clearly, they find this important. What they're telling us here is that those policies have not jumped into the incentive and reward structure for research careers. That is what this slide is telling us. Next snapshot, we were even more interested now. we wanted to know for each of these categories, so what does that mean? If this is how you evaluate research careers, what does that mean? And I'm just going to give you one example, 4 publication metrics on top. We asked the universities next, the ones that said, this is anything green, important, very important, moderately important, name names. What metrics do you actually use? And this is a slide that's really caught the attention of people. This is the result we got. I'm sort of hearing from the reaction that my point has been made. No, this is indeed a slide that really is caught, is at the center of the discussion we see now. When we ask what metrics do you actually use, the journal impact factor, 75% says we use the journal impact factor. We don't just use it, we use it specifically for research careers. Now, EUA, as the associations in the Netherlands, we are DORA signatories. We've been very clear that research output should be evaluated based on the merit of the research itself, not the venue where it is published. So, journal impact factor, H-index, a couple of others. The other categories, just to add, we asked this for every category, what exactly do you use? And what we've always seen is that if you go to that level of incentives and rewards for individual researchers, publication metrics are the most developed type of evaluation practice. The other practices, we find that universities tell us, well, we don't quite know how to evaluate an individual for these other categories. This is extremely hard. Again, open access to publications and data. Universities have a policy, they have repositories, and they say, well, we monitor this at the institutional level. We find this important, but how do we evaluate this in a research career? That is a big challenge. I'm almost at the end. I just have one more slide. We then asked, what are the main barriers and difficulties if you want to make a change to this, what we're discussing today? What are the main difficulties? And I'm not going to go through the entire slide. I want to leave a little time for questions, but up top, leading the pack is the complexity of making changes to incentives and rewards to research assessment. I think the challenge for the discussion today for this audience is to think about how do we make that just a little bit more simple. It is a big issue, and there's a lot of stakeholders and there's a lot of interest at play there. That is very complex if you want to make any type of change. How do we try and make that a bit more simple? I think that is the value of an event like today, to have that discussion, to have the partners here and engage in a dialogue. How can we work together on this? So with that, I'm leaving you. This is just the last slide summarizing everything I've just said. This will come online, I believe. And then I think the only thing I can do is thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Brecht. I was astonished, but yeah, we're among scientists, the lack of evidence of the potential benefits of reform of the assessment system. Is that was more than 20%? Does it scare you off? That so many think that there's a lack of evidence for change?
No, it shows us that we need to make that clear, what the benefit is of making these changes, which is obviously a big part of this discussion. To convince people, to win the hearts and minds, you will indeed have to make clear exactly what the benefit is, not just for institutions, but for individuals. Open science and open access is, I think this audience believes, is a good thing to go in that direction, to transition into that. But an individual researcher will indeed also have to see a benefit for his or her career.
Yeah.
There was another survey done this year by RAND Europe, which quite clearly said that researchers are very willing to diversify their output. And the one thing, the caveat that they said was, we're very willing to start producing more diverse output in the future, the next 5, 10 years. We expect this to happen, but we are led by what the impact will be, the benefit will be for our career.
Yeah.
So
I
to
was
make
also-
that clear
yeah.
is a big challenge.
Yeah, I was also quite astonished about, you already mentioned 62% of the institutes embrace open science. But if we look at the chart where, for the assessment, open science was at the bottom, really.
Yes.
So how do you explain that?
As I sort of hinted at, indeed, 62% of universities in Europe have a policy. The research funders, obviously, are gathering in Plan S. The European Commission will have Horizon Europe, the new framework program, also making open access the default option. You see that these policies exist, but then when you ask in the incentive and reward structure, it has not trickled down to that level. Explanations for that, there might be very diverse explanations. One thing, obviously, is that it is just very hard to consider, okay, how do we incentivize and reward an individual? How do we evaluate an individual for his or her activities in open access? So clearly there is a blockage between that policy level and the incentive and rewards level.
Let's ask the audience if there are any questions about your keynote. Yeah, I see there. Yeah, I see a finger. Please stand up and can you tell us your name? I think it's on.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm Tom Olijhoek. I'm working for the Directory of Open Access Journals, who indexes open access journals on quality. I'm really astonished that so many people, scientists, still believe that the impact factor is so important for judgment of the scientist output. I mean, it has been proven that the impact factor has nothing to do with the quality of individual articles in a journal. So, is there any idea with you why this is? Why keep scientists clinging to this system?
Do you know? Do you have the answer?
I just want to be clear. That slide does not necessarily tell us that the institutions are not aware of the issues with the journal impact factor. This only says that they still use it.
Okay.
They might sort of begrudgingly use it. So it's not a slide that says that this is a popular metric. We can't speak to that. But they do use it. And that is the question indeed. Why do they keep using it? There's various reasons there. As I mentioned in my last slide, the complexity of making any type of change will be an element of that. There will be a lot of other elements. There will be, in that last slide, there were a couple of categories that spoke to the external pressures, competitive environment, again, universities feeling that they need to use it because of the competitive environment they work in. Also universities telling us, well, just internally, we don't always have the capacity to engage in a full-fledged change.
So we have to find the conditions for change today.
Yes.
Here's another remark from the audience. Your name, please.
Prince Benedictus, University Medical Center, Utrecht. Indeed, we are looking for change here. You, in a way, look back, I would say. So this is what's going on now, how research evaluation takes place. Mm-hmm. Also, you described universities feel a lot of autonomy to make changes to their research assessment. I find there's a slight irony there, with everybody apparently being very autonomous, but also adhering to the same principles. But also, I think this conference is meant to look forward. So you, in a way, look back. But what are the examples you see in your union of universities doing things differently? They must be there. I thought this was supposed to be about sharing those practices and showing the way forward. Could you say a little bit about that?
Thank you so much.
Actually, the
last
next
question was this.
I believe actually a couple of the next speakers will sort of take care of that. Ghent University is here. They've just made a big change. But a bit more broadly, what we see right now, we have this long list of practices we pick up from various parts of our membership that indeed universities are working on this. In the survey, one thing that comes out quite clearly among those 260 respondents is we are working on this. We might not be at the same level, but we are working on this. And we see various things, trends that seem to work very, very well. There are a number of institutions, for example, that start small. They start with a one-pager on responsible use of metrics. And that one-pager builds a discussion within the institution that then ultimately gets picked up by academic leadership.
Okay, thank you, Brecht. There is still hope.
No, I mean, just to mention, this is one thing,
Yeah,
one example, but yes, there are many of examples to give.
Okay, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
your contribution. Rick van der Wal is already mentioned by Brecht. Ghent University started with a different assessment system on voluntary base. And Director Magnificus will join me now. He's that since 2017. Rick, take us, what did you change and why did you start voluntary?
My name is Rick. Is my microphone on? I don't think so. Now it is on. Actually, the previous speaker has put some pressure on my shoulders. I will try to survive. So I'm from Ghent University, just to let you know, and to give you a chance to know my background somehow. I have an engineering background. I'm an engineer, and I'm director of Ghent University. And Ghent University is a comprehensive university. It's a pretty large university. We have around 45,000 students, and we have about 9,000 people in our personnel. So last year, the last 2 years, we drastically changed the way in which we evaluate our professors, the way in which we look at professorial careers. I will tell you the story behind that. I would like to convey the message that it's a good thing to do, and I would also like to tell you why we did it. What are the goals actually? Why did we change the whole system? We call the system the Ghent model for obvious reasons. It's about the career path of all professors. It's about evaluation, it's about coaching, it's about incentives, it's about everything basically what you do as a professor. It's also about the question, what is it to be a professor? Why did you become a professor? Why did you fight to be able to become a professor? What is it to be an academic? Why are we what we are? Why do we want to do? At the end of the presentation, actually, there's a link to a website. There's also a link to a video. This is just a snapshot from that video. I will not show that video. Please, while I am talking, try to come up with very nasty questions, very difficult questions, and please ask these questions after my presentations. So the old school model, and actually I am a product of the old school model, is that we count. As a professor, or as a candidate for a professorship, you had to tell how many publications you had, how many PhD students you had, what the budget was that you obtained during the last 3, 5, 7, whatever number of years. It was about numbers and it was about counting. It was about metrics, actually. There was also, in many institutions, also in my institution, there was a lot of administration that you had to do in order to convince people that you were doing well. You had to fill in forms, documents, you had to provide your CV to many people and institutions and so on and so forth. And academics actually, they did not become academics because they wanted to fill in forms or because they wanted to count. They became academics because they wanted to spend time on research and education. Research basically is about finding something new, to come up with new knowledge. That's what academics should do. That's what they want to do, and they should have the maximum freedom in order to be able to do that. So being a professor is about academic freedom, but it's also about responsibility. So for us, and this is a key concept behind our model, the key concept actually is trust. But trust is a medal, and the medal has two sides. One side is academic freedom, and there should be as much freedom as you can offer to your professors. but there's also responsibility. Professors do not have the freedom to do nothing. They should do something, and they should deliver. But what they deliver should be more than just numbers. So the key thing is trust, and trust has two sides. It's about responsibility, and it's about academic freedom. For whom did we devise this new career model? Well, basically for all professors. Both part-time professors and full-time professors, both junior lecturers, assistant professors, associate professors, full professors, and senior full professors. So everyone who is a professor at Ghent University has the same possibilities in terms of our career path. And with respect to the evaluation rhythm, in the past we had every 2 or 4 years very formal evaluations. Basically now our system is based on cycles, and each cycle takes five years. And I will come back to that later on. It is still a merit and evidence-based approach. It's not because you get rid of numbers that it can't be merit-based. It's not because you get rid of numbers that it can, or that it should not be evidence-based. Your career models, they should be merit and evidence-based. But the whole thing is that we went away from the what we call the a priori approach, where you have to say, look, in the next 5 years, I will publish 10 journal publications, I will go to 6 conferences, I will apply for 6 projects. That's the a priori approach. We drastically changed to an a posteriori approach, where we say, look, at the beginning, you have to tell us what you want to do, and at the end of a 5-year cycle, you can tell us what you are proud of. What are your achievements? And we do not fix numbers beforehand. So this is basically also something that is very important in our system. It's about talent development. It has already been said before. The old school model is that as a professor, you have to claim, although you know it is not true, but you have to claim that you are an expert in education and research and societal impact and so on and so forth. You are actually a champion in everything that is stated on a form that you have to fill in. That's the old school model. We really believe this is a pretty stupid model, actually. We believe that you should take into account the talents of your professors, and these talents are different, which means that they should get the freedom, they should have the freedom to do what they are not only wanting or willing to do, but also to do the things that they are experts in. They have to get the freedom to say, look, my focus will be on high-risk fundamental research. I will start a research track, and I don't know whether I will have any result after 2 or 3 years, but there's a research question, and I want to try to solve this research question. And we will see whether this will lead or not lead to publications. This type of freedom you should have as a researcher, and that's actually what we wanted to achieve. One key aspect of our new career model is also that we don't look at the individual alone. A professor, in most cases, is part of a research group. A research group is part of a department. A department is part of a faculty, and faculty is a part of a university. So what we also ask to our professors is, how are you going to contribute to the aims, the goals, the ambitions of these entities? How are you going to contribute to the aims and the goals of your research group, of your department, of your faculty, of the university, of society? And we also ask them the other way around question. How can we help you? How can your research group help you to meet your goals? And what about the department, the faculty, the university, and society? So we look at it from a very broad perspective, not only focusing on the individual, but also taking into account what happens within the environment, so to speak. We have some what we call supporting tools. As you know, professors, they don't want to fill in too much forms. It's from an administrative point of view, it's a very simple, straightforward thing. We also provided 4 profiles going from assistant professor over associate professor, full professor, senior full professor, where, if I have to summarize it in just one sentence, I would say the focus on leadership increases as you go on during your career path. One of the reasons for that is that we had a survey where we asked pre-docs and postdocs, so non-professors actually, what are your main problems? And one of the main problems actually was stress. 1 out of 3 of our young researchers, they do have a serious level of stress during at least a couple of weeks or months during their research career. This is a problem. And if you ask then, where is the stress coming from? Well, one of the things is, I can't reach my promoter. He or she has 15, he has 20, he has 30 PhD students. My promoter is not guiding me. Not because he doesn't want to guide me, but he doesn't have the time to guide me. And he has 20 PhD students because having 20 PhD students in the evaluation system is better than to have only 15 or 10 PhD students. So that's where the ideas came from as well. The main idea in terms of promotion is that every professor who is performing well will be promoted, even if other ones are performing even better. So in terms of promotion, we somehow, we don't have any competition anymore between professors. If you are performing well, then you will get your promotion, whatever the other ones are doing or are not doing, which means that it's in your benefit to make the other ones better as well. While in a competitive system, it's a good thing for you as an individual to be the best one, which can be by improving yourself or by weakening the other ones. We wanted to get rid of that. So everybody who is performing well as an individual within his team and department and so on and so forth will get promotion. So what did we do? We have set up what we call HR committees, one HR committee for every single professor, with a double role. The role with respect to the professor is to provide individual feedback, to coach the professor, and that HR committee has also a role with respect to the faculty in terms of giving advice, providing advice with respect to the potential promotion of the professor. Who is a member of this HR committee? Well, it's a combination of people that are pretty close to the professor, and also people with what we call having a helicopter view, a broader view on the faculty, on the university, and also, and this is very important, I believe, also someone with explicit HR skills. In the past, I was the dean of our faculty of engineering. I had to evaluate about 300 colleagues. Some of them I knew, some of them I didn't know really, but I had to evaluate them. Engineers tend to think they know everything. Well, I'm not an expert in HR at all. And although I am not an expert in HR, I had to evaluate all these professors. This is wrong. So in the new system, we said, okay, we have these HR committees, and in every HR committee, we have to have an HR expert. So we have cycles of 5 years. At the beginning of the cycle, the professor tells us what his ambitions are, without having to mention any number. Those who want to mention numbers, they can, but they don't have to. After 2 years, there's an evaluation moment with this HR committee. If everything goes well, after 5 years, there is a formal evaluation moment where you have basically a pass-fail system. If the end result then there is positive, then you can start a second cycle or the next cycle of 5 years. If after 2 years some problems pop up, there's coaching. And then you have to come up with a modification plan, so to speak. One of the questions is, what do you do with the very best ones? Because in this system, You have fixed 5 years cycles for everyone, so the promotion pace, so to speak, is the same for everyone. What do you do with the top ones? Are they going to be willing to wait like everyone else? The answer to that question is no. You have to do something special for the very best ones. And that's why we came up with what we call the fast track, fast lane, so to speak. The fast track is a competitive type of promotion where you can jump from associate professor to full professor. So all associate professors in university, which is at our university, it's about 500 people, they can all apply, whatever their field of expertise is, and it's a very competitive thing. We have a two-step assessment procedure. First round is an internal assessment step, and then the second one is an assessment with external reviewers coming around the table. And finally, the board of governors is taking the decision. So this actually, the fast track, it's limited. It's only for promotion from associate professor to full professor. Everybody can apply, but it's extremely competitive. Out of these 500, only 10 to 15 get promotion. So it's a very tough competition. Just to end, the timeline that we had in order to be able to implement that. Actually, everything started in 2017. In 2017, we had elections for a new rector and vice rector at our university. We have a very strange, in a sense, a very strange system of appointing rectors and vice rectors. This is by election, and everybody within the university can vote. All students can vote, all personnel members can vote, which means, as a candidate, that you have to talk to a lot of people. And it's a lot of effort. This is streamed, so I have to be careful now. It's a lot of effort. You put a lot of energy in it, but it's a very useful thing to do in the end, because you learn to know many concerns of the people for whom basically you are working when you become director of the university. And actually, Rianne said that what you do here in the Netherlands, it's a mixture of a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach. Quite frankly, I'm standing here now as director, but quite frankly and honestly, I would say this was a bottom-up thing. Many academics came to us when we were the candidate rector and vice rector, came to us, and actually they said, you should try to change the system. And this was really hundreds of people. And nobody asked, literally nobody asked, keep the system as it is. Nobody. So actually, that was the crucial point. And then once we became rector and vice rector, we went on with the procedure that you have to follow, and then we went to the board of governors and so on and so forth. So this is how we did it. We implemented this last year. There were some milestones, but I will skip this. We implemented this last year. Just 2 slides very quickly. What are the success factors? One thing is that you need a vision. You have to dare to express the vision, to defend your vision. You need the help of academic leadership at all levels, which is much more than just the rector and the vice rector. While you are developing your vision, of course, it's about the top management of your university who has to take the lead. That's why you are in the lead at the university. But as soon as you start thinking about how are we going to implement this, you should involve the faculty. And once you are implementing it, definitely you should involve the department level. You need ambassadors. In our case, young professors at our university, but also professors coming from other universities. And specifically, the Young Academy in Flanders, they played a crucial role. They even wrote articles in newspapers asking for something new. And they really helped us to convince the ones who had to take the decisions in our own university. The importance of HR expertise. Dare to state that you are not an expert in something. I am not an expert in HR. So we asked advice and input from HR people keep administration light, and of course change management, and this is really important. This is also one of the reasons why I'm very happy to be here, to get a chance to talk to you. It's about communication. You have to communicate. You have to. You need a narrative, and you need to speak with people to try to convince them. You have to listen as well. You have to modify your own vision along the path you are following. But communication is absolutely crucial. And well, this was picked up in the international media. I was really overwhelmed, also a little bit surprised by the strength, by the level of attention we got for what we did. And it was really, at a certain point in time, it was really spectacular, actually, the feedback we got. So yes, I'm very happy that people are seeing what we are doing, and I really hope that the 14 Dutch universities will do something alike. I do think this is important, and it should be picked up by Europe, by the European Commission, by the association, and so on and so forth, very, very strongly. So please do what Rianne and Frank just proposed. Thank you
so much, Rick. Rick, you mentioned it was a bottom-up movement, but I can hardly think that there is no opposition at all at Ghent University.
Well,
be honest, although
yeah,
there's
sure.
a live stream.
Sure, yeah, I mean, there was not too much opposition while we were setting the thing up, but once it was there were some concerns. And actually, quite frankly and openly, there are still some concerns. One of the good things about the old school approach was that as soon as you got your targets in terms of numbers, it was very clear what you had to do. Mm-hmm. And if you said, look, in the next 5 years, I will have, say, 7 publications, as soon as you got these 7 publications, you knew that the evaluation would be positive. Now, while doing the things like I just explained, is also adding some uncertainty in the system. And for some people, this is an additional level of complexity, this uncertainty. So there are some concerns related to that. Another concern was, if you don't put metrics on people, what are you going to do with those who say, okay, I'm not doing anything anymore? Well, my response to that is, also in the old system, you have people who are well-performing, extremely well-performing. You have also people who are poorly performing. I mean,
yeah.
that's how
exactly
we are.
Also in old schools. Yeah.
So you will not avoid that in the old system, and we will not avoid that in the new system either. But I do understand why people are coming up with that concern. Yeah. That's why I said one last thing. Yeah. That's why I said it's so important to say, look, this is about more than just academic freedom. It's also about responsibility. And when a professor says, look, I achieved something, he or she has to prove it.
Yeah. One other question. The fast track or fast lane, yeah, or how do you mention it, is that old school measurement?
That's a very nasty question. I mean, it's somewhere in between. The challenge there is to pay equally attention to education as what you do with research.
Yeah. So they are also at your university still inseparable?
Yes, yes. And we did it for the first time last year. We will do it for the second time next year, this fast track competition. We learned from the first time that we should pay more attention to educational performance. You have to avoid that de facto, in reality, it's about evaluating research and evaluating educational performance.
And in the first track, that wasn't quite clear.
It was clear. We certainly did take into account the performance in terms of education, but we didn't stress it too much. And we will stress it more in the second round next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other questions from the audience? Oh, look at that. I already expected that. Okay, please stand up and tell us your name.
Okay, my name is Luc Florak from Eindhoven University. I also have a skeptical question about the fast lane. I understand for an individual university like Ghent why you do this. But if you come to think of it, the need for a fast track is because other universities have a fast track. Because you suggest that it would be a good idea to roll out this idea, for instance, over other universities. But if all universities would have this cycle system, then why need a fast track?
Because you have people who want to run faster than other ones. I mean, that's how I really believe that you have people who are by nature competitive, who want to be competitive, and for whom a competitive aspect of a career path is a positive thing. So that's one thing. And the other thing is, from an institutional point of view, my claim is that it is important to be able to say, look, in these fields, and in terms of professors, these are world-class professors. I think, and it will be a little bit provocative.
Are these your role models?
A little bit provocative. We should stop claiming that we are excellent as universities, that we are excellent in all fields. It's not true. University, like my university, Ghent University, we cannot be excellent in all fields. So we need a tool to be able to identify the really excellent ones. And that's also one of the purposes of this fast track.
And are these fast track professors also your role models?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily.
No.
Okay.
No.
Koen Vermeer, Young Academy.
Thank you. So Koen from the Glow Young Academy. Shall I take the mic? Or?
No.
No. Okay. That's fine.
That's my profession.
That's fine. Everyone, his or her roles. It's good. So Rick, I think this is a brilliant initiative, and I've been promoting this globally, even if you weren't aware of that. But since we're talking about concerns, I think there is one concern among your faculty also, and that is it too good to be true? And to rephrase that, can you pay for it? Can you really pay all these promotions? Is there enough money in the system? Does the university, can you hire everyone who deserves to be hired? Can everyone who deserves to be promoted in your system actually be promoted? Thank you.
Yeah, we have a 5 years budget plan, but actually was just approved last Friday by the Board of Governors. There, we took into account the promotion of all these professors, based on the hypothesis that all evaluations would be positive. So from a financial point of view, this is the worst case situation. But it's the most wanted situation, also by me as a rector, to be clear. So yes, we took into account the additional cost of this career path model.
Okay.
Yeah.
Please stand up.
And also, this is something. It's a choice. It's a choice. You can't have this without having the financial implications, which are, by the way, pretty limited.
My name is Anne Peters, Hasselt University. So
The mic is not on.
Yeah, mic. Yeah.
My name is Anne Peters, Hasselt University, coming to the Netherlands to talk to you.
Anyway, we talked before.
I have 2 questions for you and one for the organization. One is the HR committee. For the HR, the normal ones, do you work with internal people or sometimes do you use external ones? And the second one is, how much did you invest in the HR department for all the HR? And then for the organization, can you please put the heating on?
There is a terrible cold draft here, especially in the front, but probably also, we already asked.
So the first question was, with these HR committees, can you have external members? The answer is yes, you can. Second question was, these HR experts in these HR committees, how did you manage to do that? Actually, we opened vacancies. Yes, our plan was to hire 5 HR experts. We already had vacancies for 3. So actually, these were 3 new HR experts that we recruited, basically.
Because the workload is going from the staff to the
The workload is, sorry, take a mic.
The workload is going from the professors themselves to the administrative staff who do the support for all these evaluations.
Yes and no. Yes and no. Don't underestimate the workload, and also this is a concern actually. Don't underestimate the workload of all members of these HR committees. If you are the department head and you have 50 professors in your department, then you are the chair of 50 HR committees.
Oh my God.
And that's quite a task. Yeah. On the other hand, you have to ask the question, do you think it is normal that you are a professor being a part of the department and never having a chat with your department head? This is not normal.
Yeah, okay.
So
I see a lot of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we can't do it all. So
shall I stand up?
Yeah. Okay, please. Do.
Hi, my name is Elena Bondarok from Leiden University. I really liked how you started the presentation, that you don't become academic to count numbers of HR indexes and stuff like that. So I really like that. So then it got me thinking, did you evaluate this program in terms of job satisfaction of academics in your institution? Did it become better? What about the stress levels of young academics? So I understand this is a new program, so...
Oh, your question is clear.
Yeah.
Also,
Okay.
try to... Small questions, please.
Yeah, we know there are stress problems in our university, like we have in all universities actually. Whether this will have a positive impact or not, I really believe it will, but it's too early to tell. We just started with the system this year, so I don't know. I'm hoping for that, but I'm not sure. I can't prove it.
In the back.
Anton Akmera from TU Delft. Also relating to the previous talk that mentioned that middle management usually tends to stick to the metrics. How do you plan to evaluate whether the implementation of the plan is...
That's a very good question. That is also one of the things that these HR experts in these HR committees have to do. They have to somehow guarantee that the implementation at a faculty level or at the department level is according to our vision. Yeah. And you have to monitor that.
Okay, short question.
My name is Martin Björklund. I come from the University of Helsinki. I'd like to get back to the education bit, because you said you'd emphasize that. Now, I know it's easy to evaluate and promote people who bring in external money, because you eat what you kill. How do you do that with education? So, how do you get more money in to be able to promote people depending on their contribution to education?
Oh, but evaluating education is not about money. That's the crucial thing. Evaluation of education is about evaluating the progress that your students are making. I mean, education is about your students. So you have to ask your students whether they learn something or not. You have to ask the curriculum committees, the responsibles for the program, what is the input of the professors in terms of curriculum development and so on and so forth, educational innovation, active learning. Teaching is more than a professor standing in front of an audience and students are just listening.
Okay, Rick, we have other type of question.
That,
Nora van der Wende. Sorry.
Ministry of Education, Culture and Health. I'm curious about your fast track, because our experience in the Netherlands is that terms like competition, excellence, terms like that will attract more male applicants than female applicants.
Great question.
How is your gender at your university?
Yeah, we have quota. Yeah, we have quota. Yeah, in the fast, yes, we have. In the fast track, you look at the candidates, and the outcome should be balanced in terms of gender, according to the balance that you have amongst the applicants in the first round. In the second round, we can't do this anymore for legal reasons. But in the first round, we have quota, gender-based quota, and actually nobody is complaining about that.
Last question, Miedema.
I think the last question, but probably a very important question. I admire your bravery, and this is really a major change. But universities are not there to be universities, but they are there to cater to the good life. You agree with me? So how is this, how will there be strategic issues like sustainable development goals? How also around your university, it could be, say, in the region, it could be national, international. How are these sustainable development goals tethering in and say, being taken aboard in your incentive and reward system? So not every professor is a good professor when he publishes, but is he also in line and assigned to strategic development goals or to a deeper strategic issue that the university wants to address in the real world? So is Ghent University also catering to the good life?
Oh, the answer to that question is yes, but did the SDGs play a role while setting up this career path? Actually, no. And they are also not a part of our evaluation process.
That's a real problem.
Well, it's a real debate. Whether it's a problem, I don't know.
Yeah. So that's also the issue about societal impact of universities,
yeah,
and we will address that also in the sessions this afternoon. Rick, thank you so much. You inspired us. Our next speaker is Dilly Foong. Dilly, please take the floor. Where are you? Yeah, you're there. Take the floor. She is a Pro-Director Education at the London School of Economics and Political Science. And you're Professor in Higher Education, and you focus really on the mingle research, learning, engagement, and leadership. So take the floor. If you want to have a seat, no problem.
I'll stay here, I think. Thank you so much for inviting me. I think the morning so far has led rather well to what I want to say. I hope you will feel the same thing. Just to explain that Pro-Director Education is the equivalent of Vice-Rector for Teaching and Learning. I've been at London School of Economics, which is a social sciences school, for about 18 months. And before that, I was at UCL, University College London, which is a big multidisciplinary, very research-heavy institution. And so a number of the things I'm going to talk about sort of have reflections in both of those and origins in those institutions. I want to say something about going the wrong way. That's interesting. Let's just...
You have to go back.
Yeah, it's going the opposite way to the arrow. Okay, that's interesting. Let's try that again. There we go. You should have taken a moment to sort of warm up. If you feel like you need to stand up and jump up and down or something for a moment, I'm perfectly happy for you to do that. Let's just be relaxed. So I'm going to talk to you about the connection between research, education, and reward and recognition. So bear with me. I'm going to talk first of all about higher education as a place for developing powerful learning. Now, often, traditionally, higher education has been seen by the world as an elite and distant place, and this is often because we have this concept of sort of special, important knowledge. And are you picking the sound up okay? Sounds a little muffled, but special, important knowledge in universities. And of course, we have this whole hierarchy of esteem where research and research-intensive or research-rich universities, as I sometimes call them, have acquired a certain additional esteem to organizations which concentrate more on education. And likewise, within each institution, you have people who are rewarded because of these, particularly for their research activities, and as we all know, much less well rewarded for education. But if we think about what higher learning should be about today, in the 21st century, in precisely this world that our questioner was raising, where we've got huge challenges of sustainability, we've got huge challenges of political unrest and difficulty, economic challenge, climate challenge, there's so much happening. What does good learning, what does powerful learning really look like? And how can we ensure that when students come to us, that they individually and collectively, whoever they are, from every single background, leave us walking out into the world with confidence, with hope, and with the skills and the attributes that they need to really make a difference in the world. And that's whether they go into research roles or academia roles, or whether they go into society. So traditionally, we've talked about this kind of higher knowledge or higher learning as we've thought about powerful knowledge, and we've talked about rigor and stretch, and we've really praised sort of narrow specialisms. We've certainly done that far too much in the UK, but I think around the world there's been something of that going on. And of course we need specialists, but with the challenges we face now, what we need in higher education is a much more interconnected, nuanced set of relationships and practices around research and education and development and engagement with the world that is really going to make the impact that we need. So we need to sort of challenge ourselves some fundamental principles in order to make the arguments that we absolutely can make for changing our reward and recognition practices. So the example from Ghent I thought was a really great one, and in fact at UCL's changes have been massive as well, and there are many echoes between those two. And the practicalities always come from whatever is the underpinning understanding of what good is and what we're trying to do. So I'm just taking you for a few moments out of that, the specifics about promotion and reward into this issue of what does good look like. And there's a really fundamental point here that there is no contradiction between the practices of research and the practices of education and of learning. This is such a straightforward and useful quotation from Mary McAleese, that there is no contradiction between the imperative of good teaching and imperative of research which critiques, refines, discards and advances human knowledge and understanding. Now, you may be interested in, if you haven't seen it already, this publication. All of the publications I refer to that I publish in there, all open access, by the way. This is on behalf of the League of European Research Universities. It's actually called Excellent Education in Research-Rich Universities. And a number of the universities that you represent will be referred to in that paper. And we did a study of the benefits of students learning in a research-rich environment. It's just one quick quotation here, but do take a look at the paper if it interests you. All the benefits for students of the intellectual depth associated with engaging in cutting-edge investigations, and from the range of skills associated with independent and collaborative inquiry. Because we know from the research that it is not a given that students will benefit from being in a research-intensive environment when they're learning. What makes them benefit is connecting with the research and learning to think and practice like researchers, to become critical inquirers. That's when they benefit. And so what I'm best known for is developing this concept of the connected curriculum. And again, this book, A Connected Curriculum for Higher Education, published by UCL Press, which incidentally publishes everything open access as a matter of principle. This book actually pulls together this argument about rethinking what we do in higher education, and also those implications for then how we reward. Incidentally, as a plug for open access, in the first 2 years since publication, this book was downloaded more than 32,000 times in 164 countries. So if you're a scholar who doubts that open access is the way forward, I really encourage you to think about open access. Now, this is I'm just going to briefly walk you through the framework, because obviously time is short, but just to give you a sort of flavor of it. So, at the core of this connected curriculum framework is this principle that what we need to do is empower students by developing their capacity to investigate in a range of ways, to deal with the unexpected, to really become inquirers. And that we know, and if you want to look at more of on this, take a look at the book. There's a lot of evidence, a lot of empirical evidence to show that students learn much more effectively when they are actively engaged in inquiry, and they're not just sitting and just receiving however complex and interesting the information is. So this was the core principle of the framework. The first dimension, and this was and by the way, this has been introduced, similar principles at LSE now, but at UCL, this is a whole institutional strategy, so it's been absolutely sort of part of the whole institution's actual 20-year strategy. The first dimension is about connecting students with research and researchers. We have been really unimaginative in the past about how students could connect with researchers. And you'll see a whole set of examples of ways in which we can do this much better. I'll give you one quick example. We have an initiative called Meet the Researcher, where undergraduate students in their first year arriving at university get together in small groups so they get to know one another really quickly. And they are challenged to investigate the work of one of the researchers in the department. And they do some work, they find out everything they can by every possible means, and then they go and meet the researcher and interrogate them and ask them lots of questions about their research and why they do it and who funds them and why they should, and lots of difficult questions like that. And as you know, researchers love to talk about themselves, so it works really well. And then the students can construct an output. And often that output will be a presentation or a video, a podcast or something about the work of that researcher, which of course the researcher also loves. Now what this means is that right from day one, those students have understood that knowledge is not something that just comes from a textbook or that comes from God above and that you have to sort of somehow remember and regurgitate in the exam room. If we are developing students in that manner, we are never going to solve the world's problems through having great researchers who can engage with the world in very imaginative, outward-facing ways. So this is just a small example of one of many different interventions that we've used to make sure that students regularly and deeply engage with researchers all the way through their learning. The second dimension is about curriculum design, and it's about building degree programs where you have a research through line so that students all the way through their degree, whatever they're learning in various courses and things, at the core have an unfolding connected set of opportunities to develop their understanding of what research questions are, how to really engage with research and inquiry. Again, there's a whole chapter on each of these in the book, so and with examples, so do take a look if you're interested. The third one, again, won't come as any surprise to you. It's about connecting across disciplines. And this picks up this issue of specialism versus connectivity. We will not challenge populism. We will not solve the world's problems around climate change without connecting across disciplines. It is not going to happen. And so we have to work with our students and work ourselves as scholars, as researchers, in much more creative and imaginative ways in order to really maximize those opportunities. And I know many of you are doing that in your universities too. Another fairly straightforward one, but again, lots of interesting examples. Students connecting academic learning with workplace learning. What we found from research was that if you ask faculty, they will say, well, of course students are learning things that are useful to them in the workplace. And if you ask the students, they're a bit less sure. If you ask the students to articulate how their learning is useful to them in the workplace, they are hopeless. They really have not learned how to do that. So we've put in a number of really interesting and sort of vibrant ways of enabling students to properly articulate and connect those different areas. And then really key element, students learn to produce outputs, assessments directed at an audience. So we're substituting a lot of those traditional assessments, and I know many of you do too across your institutions, with much more outward-facing communications. So instead of always just writing the essay or doing the project or whatever it is that goes back to the tutor, then what you're doing is you're creating, a serious video, sort of documentary video that is going to actually be public. And what we're doing here is we're connecting students with the idea of knowledge and inquiry and evidence and argument and audiences and external stakeholders and public engagement. So this is another way of connecting students with researchers, because the students are working with the researchers on engaging the public around the research. And we've just got to create a much more exciting and sort of dynamic relationship between these areas. In the book, I also talk about something called the Showcase Portfolio, which is a program level or degree level selection of the best outputs with a connective narrative that really showcases the best of every individual student's work and their thinking. So do take a look at that if it's of interest. And then finally, students connect with each other across phases and with alumni. So this is about the human connections, much more linking across years, undergraduate, postgraduate, and much more connectivity, structured ways of making sure we stay in touch with our alumni. Now, I've written, as well as talking about education research, there's an article here which again is open access, and you've got the links at the end of the slide, which I know you'll have access to. An article called Strengths-Based Scholarship and the Scholarship Circle. And this is where the link happens with reward and recognition. Okay, it's a fundamental step, logical step here. So my argument is that what we need to do is to reward scholars. We need to reward scholarly practice, but that scholarly practice is not only entirely most within a kind of pure research segment. What it's about is engagement and impact, cutting across communication channels, engaging the world, making an impact on the world, with critical inquiry and dialogue as fundamental to the concept. But we've got research, we've got education, we have scholarly leadership. What does it mean to be a scholarly leader in universities? We have people who are inquiring into education, who are engaging the scholarship of teaching and learning. And those people need to, if they're specialists in that and spending more time on that, they need the reward for that kind of scholarship. So the reason why it's called strengths-based scholarship is it's a very much an echo with the Ghent example, actually, about what are you doing? What are your strengths? What are you developing? In what areas are you developing? Inquiry into research, those meta-level investigations into understanding research, what works with research and what doesn't. We do far too little of that. We're very poor at it, and we don't reward people in the ways that we should for it. And then academic development has been mentioned a couple of times. We need to develop ourselves in order to be able to sort of really play to our strengths in all of these areas. So what I argue is that for institutions, we need to draw on scholarly values and evidence to make our decisions about how we reward. We need to properly take seriously our own values. We need to review our job roles to ensure that all expertise is fully recognised. And I would just, maybe slightly controversially, just slightly challenge the notion that every faculty member needs to both research and teach. And I'll explain why. I think it's absolutely vital that every educational expert has experience with research and fully understands how important it is for students to be learning through research activities. But they can become experts in if you like, inquiry without necessarily being at the cutting edge of a particular field or remaining at the cutting edge of a particular field. So they become educational experts in that field without, as I say, necessarily hitting the buttons of what we would normally call research. But I'm happy to take questions and issues about that. And then obviously we need to reward scholars for their contribution. And we've been talking about that already, and about the importance of recognising contexts of different departments, different disciplines, and different parts of the career, and so on. Now, there's another publication, again, I'll just mention it. Do take a look at it. It's completely open access. It's called Rewarding Educators and Education Leaders in Research-Intensive Universities. Is a bit of a mouthful. If you look at Rewarding Educators and Fung, you'll find it, and you can download it, which was funded by the Higher Education Academy in the UK, which does good work. It's now called Advance UK, does really good work in sort of pulling together some thinking around these things. But in this paper, my colleague and I argue that if we do break down some of the structural and conceptual divides between research, practice, education, impact, and so on, we can develop distinctive new forms of research-based education, but we can also move towards parity of esteem for educators, practitioners, researchers, innovators, all of the key people and activities that we want to happen in our universities. And so my final slide, looking to the future, I just would summarize by saying we absolutely need to revise our promotion criteria and look again at our job roles. It's happening a lot in the UK, and there are some really good examples. The work that Ruth Graham's been doing, that I know you're going to hear about, nice to see you, Ruth, has made a phenomenal contribution in the UK. And I know when we've had conversations earlier, a few years ago, when all of this was really starting, and I don't think we really knew then just how huge this whole agenda would be. And there's massive momentum across the sector, and I really congratulate VSNU and the EUA for really leading this sort of movement today and making this such an important theme. It's absolutely vital. But if we're going to make a success of this, we have to challenge those underpinning prejudices and misunderstandings about the value of things. So if we continue to, in our heart of hearts, think that research is more important than education, because we don't know how importantly intersected they are conceptually, we're not going to really affect the change that we need to. So we have to challenge some of those really fundamental assumptions, even in our own hearts and souls, and to look at creative 21st century examples about how the best of these things are brought together. We have to remember that research is nothing without extending knowledge, skills and practices through education. That's why the engagement side is so important. And that teaching itself is a scholarly activity. And so we have to work for this greater equity. There are gender implications across the sector. There are other inclusion implications because of the different roles people have taken on historically too, which I haven't got time to go into, but is referred to in the paperwork. But I'm absolutely delighted to be here today and to see so many of you interested in this. And I really congratulate you and encourage you to be brave, to have courage. What's it Kierkegaard recommended? Humility and courage. I think that's what we'll do, humility and courage on this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Dilly. Dilly, how many institutions in the UK already work with the connected curriculum?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think to different degrees explicitly, I would say, I don't know, maybe 20 or something. I mean, I guess I've done talks about it on probably 120, 140.
And do they also change their assessment system then?
So there's quite a significant movement towards moving towards this more authentic outward-facing assessment. I'm still trying to push the envelope of what's possible with it, because I personally also think that part of our challenge is the fact that our students in our modular degrees, where they are in danger of stamp collecting. You know, students do this course and they pass it, and then they do that course and they pass it, and they do that course and they pass it. And if they've collected the right number of stamps, we give them a degree. And what we're not doing intellectually is challenging them to think at the meta level about what knowledge is and about the relationships between different theoretical perspectives and different types of evidence and argument and all of those sorts of things. Qualitative, quantitative, all of that. And therefore, the education is a little is sometimes thinner, I think, than it should be if we're going to really affect a change in society. So I think there are some more ambitious aspects going on, but there is a lot of work across the UK in reframing assessment for sure.
Okay. Questions from the audience? If it comes to education, no
stunned
questions
everybody into
at
silence. No, we've got some over there.
Hello, I'm Henrika Mustijoki from the Finnish Federation of Learned Societies. I guess this goes to the previous speaker as well. Talking about phases in your research career, you said, I think quite rightly, that people should have an opportunity to focus on education or research. But could we see in the way we now look at reward and recognition that people could have distinct phases, that if you give up your cutting edge research, doesn't mean you give it up forever, as most people feel now. The moment you step away from that, there is no going back, the door locks behind you.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question. And my answer to it is we should definitely think about more flexibility and fluidity in phases. The reason why it's sometimes complex to go back to research, as we know, and more so in some disciplines than others, is that in some disciplines, if you're not still there at the kind of cutting edge of what's happened recently, then it's harder to be back in that research space. But if your whole curriculum and what you're doing with your students is actually really closely connected with what's going on at the cutting edge of research, you're much more in touch with it. And so it makes that fluidity between phases much more possible.
2 questions over there. Your mic is not working. The mic over there. Yeah. It's working.
Jan van der Veen, 4TU Center for Engineering Education. Thank you for your talk and also for thanking upgrading education from the also important category to the center stage. Yeah. I like that very much. Do you see examples of how professorships are connected to these new connected curriculum kind of improvements?
Thank you for that question. So if I can use UCL as an example, where they've changed the promotion criteria and they're also really, embedding connected curriculum sort of principles. Actually, as is not uncommon in the UK, UCL has a percentage of its academic staff who are what we call education focused. So they are not required to return, or to publish. I mean, many of them do stay involved with research, but they are not required to publish. And in that category, there have been some wonderful appointments up to professorial, full professorial qualifications in an education-focused track. So do take a look at how that's possible. But also in the more mainstream, the larger percentage of faculty roles which do both education and research, there are many examples of where what UCL does, it asks people to write an impact narrative, a little similar to, I think, something that our colleague from Ghent was talking about, where they're basically saying, it's a story. What have I done in my scholarly work, in my education, in my research? What have I actually done that has made a difference? And it might be it's made a huge difference to this master's program, and therefore, to this particular profession or whatever. It might be that, there's some research over here, and I've brought that together with this particular educational activity over here. So there have been some really good examples of promotion based on that story. But this is why you need fluidity and flexibility in claiming a promotion. And that's why you need a story rather than numbers, or rather than exclusively numbers, in order to explain exactly what difference your scholarship is making.
The strengths of storytelling. Another question over there, and then the last question two questions in the back.
Egon Willighagen, Maastricht University. I'm a researcher. I'm at this moment having so much research, I struggle with the teaching part, but I like to do that as well. Now, you brought up the point of academic skills, the thinking about what am I doing, why am I doing it, but I find these things really hard to assess. But as a teacher, that assessment is one way I'm actually rewarded and recognized. So, but not, being forced to do a lot of research, which I enjoy as well. But how could I improve my teaching skills regarding the assessment of these harder to assess skills for the students?
That's a big question. And a very sensible question. I think what we need to do is to be able to draw on experts, both in the literature and if you have them in your institution or in other nearby institutions, whose specialist area this is. And the thing is, in the past, we haven't recognized that we have people with this sort of specialist knowledge about the relationship between academic skills development and research and education and so on. I think reading around that subject and what research tells you works is really, really helpful. Yeah. Did you want to respond?
Is there particular work that you can recommend around critical thinking?
Probably several, but shall we catch up afterwards and maybe I can send the links
Otherwise we're
as
getting
part of the
too
follow-up?
much in depth.
Thank you.
Your question and then you're the last.
So I like the structure of the connected curriculum, but do you have an estimate of whether it takes more time of staff per student learning hour than the traditional course-based curriculum? And if it does, and if this difference is large, how can universities transition?
Yeah, that's a very good question. My answer is that depending on how you design the curriculum, it can be more time. And that is a rather disciplinary specific, but it mostly means that you need some more flexibility about levels of expertise, so that you don't... So if you're doing a traditional lecture course, you need somebody who's an expert to stand up for an hour or 2 hours or however and just talk. And as long as they're carrying on and the students are sort of taking notes, etc., that's a sort of a very fixed commodity, if you like. It's not at all the most efficient way of people learning, but it's a fixed cost, if you like. If you change that around, so an example that I refer to in the book is the whole engineering curriculum at UCL, which has completely transformed itself from that sort of model in a relatively short time to a model where all of the engineers from all the different engineering degrees, of which there are numerous, as you may know, they spend their first year working in cross-disciplinary groups, working on challenges that are set by external companies and organisations. And so you need more resource in organising that, in bringing the people in from outside, in facilitating the problem-faced learning and so on. You don't necessarily need more, and in some cases you might need slightly less for some periods of the very specialist, high-end academic expertise. So obviously it's part of the design challenge to work out how you can do that within the resource envelope
and use
have.
different didactical methods also.
Yeah.
Last question from the University of Leiden.
Harriet.
Thank you. Hi.
Stand up, please.
Stand up. Okay. Thank you, Dilly, for your presentation. Dilly and I know each other. And thank you for championing action research in our own teaching and learning. I think this is really important. And at Leiden University, we're also looking ways into how we can involve our students in this. Can you give us some examples of what you have been doing in your own practice?
Yeah, I mean, I guess in my current role as Vice Rector, I'm slightly removed from what's actually going on, but I can give you some good examples. Actually, I can point you to some really good examples from McMaster in Canada, who I think are probably have been one of the leading universities in involving students in pedagogic research in their own, or learning and teaching related research in their own, within their own organisation, if you like. And many institutions are doing it. So if any of you are interested in this, and you look at under sort of students as partners, as a bit of a tag, do look for further examples. But we've certainly had a lot of success with students being brought into teams where they're addressing, so we run something called Lse Changemakers. I did the same at UCL, where students work together in small teams and on paid sort of projects really, as part-time activities, and they address an aspect of education or the student experience within the institution. They investigate it, they come up with analysis of data, they give recommendations back to the university, and I think that's a really good model if anybody's interested.
Dilly, thank you so much for your keynote and your attribution. So our last inspiration today for the sessions in the afternoon is a panel discussion. May I ask the four of you to join us on stage? Ladies and gentlemen, we will see Michael Murphy, the president of the EUA, Mangala Srivinas, president of the Young Academy of Europe, Ruth Graham, her name was already mentioned, consultant in higher education, and Jeroen Geurts, president of ZonMW. You all are quiet, isn't it? Yeah.
We are.
Yes. Michael, you are also co-hosting more or less this conference today. What is your attraction to do different assessments in the future?
Because the ones in the past...
The ones in the past, yeah.
Have,
you're
not,
wired.
have not served us well enough to provide what we need into the future. We've been too narrowly focused, as many speakers have said, on those things that are easily measured. But those things that are easily measured are not necessarily the most important, and vice versa. And so the document that has been produced here by the Dutch today, I would agree with in every line practically. The importance of a holistic understanding of the role of an academic for the future, and how shall I put it, confirmation to themselves, to their institution, to their students, and to societies that they're doing a good job.
Okay, thanks. Mangala, you're president of the Young Academy. You're also group leader at the Radboud University Medical Center. Do you already feel a sense of change in the assessment at your university?
Not yet, which is why we're here.
For me, nice to know now as supervisor.
Well, but that's why we're here today, right? I mean, change doesn't happen overnight, and I think it's wonderful that we're doing this now, and we're recognizing that academic success comes in different flavors. But I think one thing we should keep in mind is that although we might put the changes on paper to start in 2021 or whatever, it will take years to get over the implicit bias that will exist. And this is something we need to keep in mind and keep reinforcing the principles that we're talking about today.
And in what way do you think the assessment should change first?
I think we need to recognize that there is diversity in what it means to be a successful academic. And all of the points that were raised earlier are all excellent, and I think we should try our best to follow that, as hard as it is.
Okay. Jeroen Geurts, president of Autonomy, you already tried to do something about scientists in 2030 in the start of this year. It was also a conference with a lot of young scientists.
Yeah.
Did it already make a change in your organization?
It did, yeah. It did in our organization, but I think broadly in the country there's this buzzing, I should say, of the concept of scientists 2030. Sorry, scientists 2030, who is more open, more diverse, more fair. In his evaluation of others. I think we've managed to do a lot already in a very brief time. But there's also still a lot to do. So when we go home today, and I think it's been said a number of times already, we go home, it's very, let's say it's very easy to not say much about what we've discussed today, or just go back to the practice that we are used to. But we need to discuss this position paper everywhere and every day to see the change that we want to see.
Okay. Ruth Graham, your name was already mentioned by others. You inspired also a lot of other people. You are a mechanical engineer, and I was wondering, you are also specialized in aeronautical fatigue?
My PhD was in aeronautical fatigue, yes.
Oh, yeah. And but now you are a consultant. Why did you change from research in a consultant?
Well, I was starting out on an academic career. I expected to have an academic career. And actually, while I was at Imperial College about 20 years ago, I was asked, because I was doing more interesting things, I think, in the classroom, I was asked by the dean at the time to take a 3-month secondment, look around the world to see where education was going and perhaps how Imperial College might change its education. And it was a really eye-opening experience for me. I was working in a very narrow research field, aeronautical fatigue, which I really enjoyed, but the experience of looking at education and a really strong sense that education is changing I just felt that I could have a bigger impact in education. And one of the things that's been interesting to me, I've been a consultant now for 12 years. The momentum for change has really changed in the last, I would say in the last 5 years.
And what is that momentum then?
I think there's a recognition and a collaboration, and I think this gathering today is a reflection of that, a real sense of collaboration between universities for change, a recognition that there are issues that people want to solve, but actually by working together, by sharing ideas, and by collecting agreement between institutions, an awful lot can be done in education. And I would have said 5 years ago, that really wasn't happening to the extent it is now, and there really is, I see a real acceleration of that, and it's incredibly exciting to be part of these kind of conversations, but other conversations like this happening around the world now, and really quite significant change happening, not just in education, not just the practice, but actually to the support system that underpins that.
Yeah. We have 4 challenges for you. We already prepared that, but I also want to have your input. That's why I ask you to pick up your smartphone and use the Mentimeter. You can find the Wi-Fi as Maasilo guests. It's open, but hopefully we aren't hacked today. And then you go to menti.com and use this code 413374. And then we get used to it with the first question, who are you? So somebody already is in. And then we can look into it. The academics are still... No, not in the front anymore.
Lots of chiefs.
There's no student.
No student. Well, maybe other. Delft, no, I saw one of the students who was asking questions, and he's from Delft University, so... But less students than others, and a lot of directors and policy advisors, as we can notice. Yeah. Okay, I think we are almost done. Thank you so much. We will show you the first question. The quality of research should be assessed based on its scientific or societal impact instead of the journal impact factor. You can agree or disagree. That's the only thing you can do today. At this moment. Ruth, what would you have voted? What would you have voted?
Agree.
Agree. And is that easy to do the quality of research assessed by scientific or societal impact? Is that easy to do and get rid of the biometrical journal impact factor?
And I think that there's the challenge, and I think that's the challenge both on the education side and on the research side, that often the metrics that are used, there's been some kind of pre-assessment. So if you use the journal impact factor, there's already been a peer review process that gives you that number. If you use student evaluation scores on the education side, there's an assessment that's already taken place. And actually, I think I think it's absolutely right to look much more widely, and particularly look at the impact that individual has had. But actually, that assessment process is more difficult, and it's more because it happens within the individual's promotion case or within the promotion committee's discussion, and actually bringing in external expertise and thinking more carefully about what kind of evidence you need. But it's a more difficult process than just looking at those numbers and making an assessment on that basis. Yeah. So I think it's changing, thinking about who needs to be in that room when you make the assessment, and is it just the people that are currently on the promotion board, or are you actually do you need to bring other kinds of expertise into that discussion to make an informed decision?
You don't?
Yeah.
Other expertise?
Other expertise?
In the board, for instance, for...
Yeah, so that would be good, I guess. But I also want to say that one of my assistant professors in my own department was very worried when this plan came out and said, so from now on, you're not going to be interested anymore whether I publish in Nature or in Science.
So you understand those 5 disagrees.
And I said, well, you know, I'm still impressed when you publish in a journal that is difficult to publish in. It's just that we need your story. We need you to tell me why it's important.
The narrative.
To the narrative, exactly. Why it is important for you to make that choice to go for that one paper in that one journal with a high impact factor, whereas you could, for example, publish 3 smaller papers sooner, and society would have the information sooner. So that
but
discussion
also journalists look at Nature and Science, for instance, and
sure.
publish about it, so that has also his societal impact, and
Absolutely.
maybe even more.
Well, yeah. So you know, it's all about, I think, the conversation that you have with your people. It's not that journal impact factors are forbidden from now on. It's just that they need to be part of a discussion. Need to be part of a narrative that the scientists themselves
Michael?
have.
I would have refused to answer that question because it is both imprecise and sloppy thinking.
Okay, tell us.
None of these have anything to do with the quality of the research. They have to do with the importance of the research or the value of it. But quality is a completely different matter. It's such issues as the methodology that was used, the appropriateness of the methodology to the question that is asked. Sorry guys, I don't know where all the academics were when that question was being answered. Now, importance of and value of research are the societal and scientific impacts. And the journal impact factor has nothing to do either with the importance or the quality of it.
Mangala?
Yes, I was going to make the same point that excellence and impact are not the same thing. And we need to reward excellent research whether or not it has impact, right? I mean, there might be very good research that doesn't have any impact in the foreseeable future, which doesn't mean it's not important. But I think the important statement here is that we shouldn't focus on the journal impact factor.
Correct.
Which I think all of us agree with.
Those 5 disagrees, who want to reflect on that? Or no, come.
They have high readership.
Hello? Test. Ja, daar komt u.
Sikko Knecht, Science Guide here. So what I'm hearing a lot today is that researchers don't like administrating stuff. You want to actually be judged on the basis of a narrative. Now, I'm going to ask this question to Jeroen, because I know he won't judge. How do we reconcile this kind of rhetoric with the fact that right now the VSNU is negotiating with Elsevier in exchange for open access, going full out on having them implement Scopus, Civil, Pure, and other ways to in a bureaucracy note down what people have achieved?
Yeah. You know, great question.
Great question. And you have the answer for us.
I guess you should ask that to somebody who's actually governing a university. There are a few here, but I'm willing to go to some length in trying to answer your question. Of course, we are. So let me ask you one question back, Sikko. What is your exact?
Easy.
What is your exact problem? What's your
concern?
So I don't have a problem, let's be clear about this, but of course we brought this information and people responded to it, and I've been hearing a lot from people in universities saying, like, the least favorite thing that I do is go to Pure and fill out everything that I've published up until now.
Yeah.
And I know that universities use this as a way to tell the ministry or themselves that they're doing great.
Yeah.
But then I'm just asking, how is this new focus on numbers going to help you in creating narratives?
So then I understand your question well. I thought you might be alluding to open science. Actually, I agree with you. We shouldn't count publications. We shouldn't count number of successful grants that you've acquired during the last few years. I'm not doing that anymore with my own staff, and I'm trying to inspire others not to do that anymore as well. But there's still a way to go. We still have to take a few steps within universities and within granting institutions, within research institutions, to discuss with each other, because it feels so safe to ask people, how much did you publish? Why did you only publish 3 papers this year? You could have published 10. It doesn't say much. It doesn't tell you much about the quality or the plan that the researcher has.
Okay,
and that's what we really need to know.
Clear. Rianne, and then I come back to you.
Maybe on the pure, I am encouraging our staff to fill in, to deposit their academic work in pure in order to allow for open access. So it's not that I'm using it as a measurement tool to count.
Right.
I'm using it to make the content available to society.
And to
try to increase the green open access route through pure.
Yeah.
Also when it's still in the embargo period with the publishers that are not going along.
Yeah, that's
so
a good
it's,
idea.
I think, a very good way also to stimulate open science.
Your own repository in a sense, yeah.
I'd like to know, Michael, if we want to do quality of research in a different way, should we get rid of the journal impact factor?
I'm not an absolutist on anything, even
Okay.
though.
But what should be on number 1?
I'll just make my point. Boolean logic from my university, Professor Boole, 1-0. I believe it's not a good approach to this agenda. The best for me is a combination of the person being evaluated being asked to present you with the 4 or 5 most important papers that he or she has produced, and setting out why they think they're important, and then inviting peers to actually take a look
at peer review
what is peer review.
Necessary.
But I wouldn't throw away journal impact factors completely, because the reality is that these also happen to be the most widely read journals in the field that you're operating in. And if you are aiming at publishing there, you are making a statement that I want to reach out to my peers and as broad an audience as possible.
Yeah.
So
Mangala,
there is a value.
Do you want to elaborate on that? Do you want to elaborate on that? Or give
I think
extras?
I think we need to be a little bit careful about targeting high-impact journals, because often they publish what they think more people would want to read. It's not necessarily a reflection of how important your research actually might be. And that's something we need to keep in mind. But absolutely, we can't completely rule out impact factors either.
Okay. Question from the audience, and then here in the front. And then I go to the second question.
Egon Maastricht University again. Following up on the things discussed here right now, so the journal impact factor...
The mic a little bit... No, come a little bit here, otherwise you have the speaker. And a little bit closer to the mouth. Yeah, thank you.
So the thing with journal impact factor and any metric at all is that if we do not have control over what it does, how it's calculated, like with the impact factor, which is not available for all journals. Journal without an impact factor doesn't count, that sort of things. If we do not have control over these metrics, if they're not transparent, do we want to use them? So my question to the panel here is, how important do you think that open infrastructures are, and what roles do the European universities have in encouraging these open infrastructures so that academia can take control again over the diversity? We need to have things, if we measure things, that they actually cover all the diversity that we want to achieve with this positioning paper.
Well, I mean, I'm coming more from the education side, so I'm probably not the best person to comment on that.
It has to happen. I mean, things are not going to change. Publishers are not going to change their behaviors or come to the table unless they know that there is a credible threat, that the fundamental model that keeps them in business is under threat. And without these infrastructures and without the movement that we're supporting here today, there won't be the change that we require. Now, it's a 10-year project, and we all know that at the end of the day, there will be compromises. There is a very valuable service that publishers actually provide to us as academics, if only they would do it without extracting such enormous margins and making life so difficult for us. But I think these infrastructures are a critical part of the process that's going to move us to the ideal solution over the next 10 years. Yeah.
Mijn microfoon, handmicrofoon alsjeblieft, ja.
Yeah, Tim Bedford from the University of Strathclyde. The point that was just made about choice of journals to get academic reach, I think is an excellent one, and I would like to add an extra point on that, which is that we need to advise our ECRs, early career research, and as other colleagues, about the best ways in which they can use the journal system through refereeing to increase the quality of their journals. Actually, the whole aspect of the quality process for science that is given by journals is completely absent from the debate at the moment. I think that has to be at the heart of it, because the difference between, right, I don't really care so much about whether a journal has a high impact factor. What I care for my colleagues is whether it provides excellent refereeing process and therefore adds value to the scientific process.
Thank you. Anyone here who wants to reflect? Mangala?
So I don't think this necessarily has to be tied to the journal. There are already systems like the Open Research Central, I think it's called, which is supported by the Wellcome Trust, where you can publish your research, and then there's a peer review process, and this is open as well, and then you can respond to this. There's no reason the quality of peer review needs to be linked to the journal, although I agree peer review is essential.
Okay, we go to the second question. So I want to quick a little bit the discussion, because we have 3 more challenges to go. The leadership skills is now at stake. So a lot of disagrees. Mangala, are you surprised about that?
I am a little bit surprised, because if you take a step back, PhD students are not necessarily trained in leadership or mentoring skills, but you expect that from a group leader. So not rewarding early career group leaders for this is kind of counterproductive, I think.
Yeah.
What is the type of leadership that we want from young people? That is something that I would be interested in. What is it that we want them to
Do you have suggestions of your own?
Well, just a few observations. Very young scientists, when I try to usher them in the direction of leadership, they kind of shy away. So in my opinion, it's a bit more suitable for mid-career scientists who really should start thinking about their leadership. But it's probably my fault that I can't see how to help really young people.
Mangala, can you help Jeroen?
What do you mean by really young?
Let's say just my age. No, I'm just kidding. But let's say beginning their careers. Just
so like a postdoc?
Like a PhD student even.
Mangala.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I think we don't necessarily train PhD students with the skills that they will need even to become a good professor, let alone the fact that most PhD students don't even become a professor, right?
Yeah.
And leadership is just one of these things, but also communication, etc.
Yeah.
And whether this is the best way to do it maybe is debatable, but I think clearly leadership and mentorship is something we should teach from an early stage.
Yeah, and should value.
Michael, how do we do that? How do we learn leadership skills for young academics?
There are actually lots of good examples across the university system, across Europe, on how to do this. Programs that enable people to acquire the skills that are deployed for leadership, such as conflict resolution, communication, cultural sensitivity. There's a whole spectrum of skills that you expect to see in leaders, which don't descend by miracle of the Holy Ghost. They actually have to be experienced and learned. So the first requirement is that the young academic should grow in an environment that enables them to acquire these skills. I would also say, however, that we've got to watch out for what I call a fetish of the university system, and that is to preach on all our websites about the fact that we develop leaders. I think we also need to say that we develop followers, probably more importantly for society. People who are able to function well in teams and to acknowledge leadership and respect leadership and know how to influence leadership. So you've got to get a balance right. You've got to help people acquire the skills, then you reward them based on how they acquire them and how they deploy them. But don't dismiss people because they're not leaders in the end if they're good team players.
Ruth? I agree completely. I think there's a balance there with development and then reward and recognition. But I think also thinking about what we mean by leadership. And I think very often people talk about service and various things that people do within institutions. But I think institutional impact really is what I would look to when I talk about leadership. You know, and it's not just a managerial position. It's not just a hat that you wear, that you're leading accreditation or you're sitting on a committee, but actually someone who has impact and legacy on the institution. So people who set up a mentoring scheme for faculty, people who set up really supportive collaborations with other institutions. Those kind of schemes very often don't fit within our promotion systems.
But can you expect it from young academics?
No, I wouldn't, not necessarily, but I think it's the system, that kind of leadership that has legacy and real institutional impact. Very often there isn't a box to tick by the promotion criteria for where that fits in, and it often falls between the cracks.
But as a funder, Maria, I would like to have young people on board, just to have them learn how to judge other people, how to assess other people, and also to bring their vantage point to the fore. And I think we're doing that not well enough.
Not enough?
No.
The disagrees in the room, maybe you can elaborate a little bit on your disagree. Right in the back, and then I come here in the front. You're one of our...
I think...
Oh.
Yeah. I think that leadership is one of the aspects, and just before we discussed how balancing between different aspects is important. And I also think it's not precise to combine leadership and mentorship in the same bucket, so to say. So these two, in my opinion, are rather different, and also by definition, very few people are actually leaders.
Anybody reflect on the stage? No, thank you.
Yeah.
Hi again, Elena Bonderok from Leiden University. I couldn't disagree more with this statement because of the first word, basically, especially young academics. Because, well, I think we should all be rewarded and evaluated on how we help others. So this is what leadership means. You lead somebody else, that you have actually create a fertile ground for others to grow. So for me, as a young academic, I'm sorry, but whom can I lead yet? So I'm doing my best, I am here, but at the same time, sorry, but what are we talking about? This is about taking responsibility of middle management, but all. So my biggest problem is the first word.
Okay, you're
Well,
reading quite well.
There is an increasing number of young academies that is attached to universities or national global young academy, and I think actually young people are very well trained when they enter such a young academy. So I would encourage that from the youngest phases.
You first, and then Helsinki.
That was a close encounter with the microphone. Hi, my name is Bartel van der Wallen from TU Delft. I'm at the age group where I am in a leadership position of sorts. I disagree a bit with the statements I made. I see leadership all around me, especially in students, especially in PhD students. I think the trick for us in our position is to let go, to sometimes just give confidence to these people and say, hey, you can do this, and show us what you're good at, what you bring. So it's also a bit of the leadership of us is to give the leadership to
That's
the
also
younger
kind
people.
of reward. Helsinki.
Martin Björklund, nice to meet you. And Ruth, I'm here. We're co-hosting later this afternoon. This is an interesting question. I would add that much of what you mentioned as leadership skills sounds to me like education, assessment and so on. So to the extent I would answer yes if I was clear that the definition of leadership is a sound one and that it resembles and also helps the same type of communication skills we need for good education. And there's a third component, which is science communication. So if you're a good educator, you might use those skills to be a decent leader and probably a fairly good science communicator. And that's why I think it's very important to include the idea that education is not a zero-sum game with research, for example. So
any reflection from the audience? Sorry, from the panel? No? Here, last question.
A question, more a remark, perhaps. Jeroen Bosman from Utrecht University Library. I especially think that young academics should be rewarded for leadership skills, and that includes students even, they are academics as well. We've got lots of great examples at our university of students setting up journals together with other academics, of students leading the way on how to code reproducibly and share that code, students leading the way in team science. It's really leadership, but it's another kind of leadership. It's not leadership creating hierarchies or judging people. It's leadership really working collaboratively and doing that in open science communities, etc. So really, we should look at them and let them lead, and not only ask whether they could lead.
Okay, thank you for this remark. So, if you are looking at an assessment system, what are leadership skills and how do we elaborate on that? Last question for now. The next slide, please. It should be possible to become a full professor based on outstanding achievements in education alone. What is your reflection, Ruth, on that?
Well, I mean, I think that the education alone piece, I really feel that's down to the institution. That for some institutions, yes, they feel comfortable with having one individual that's specialist in 100% research, 100% education, whatever it is. I think for a lot of institutions that wouldn't be the case. But absolutely becoming a full professor on the basis predominantly of education, absolutely. But I think there are a number of challenges that a lot of universities face to making that happen. One is, how do you define impact in education? And it needs to be beyond the classroom, at professorial levels. So what does that mean?
Can somebody be on that position without research experience?
Well, as I say, I think that's down to the institution. But I think having, I'd absolutely support having a wide diversity of career pathways. But as I say, there are challenges. You know, how do you create career pathways in education that are statusful, that people want to apply for, that aren't seen as second-class citizens, that really allow that flexibility to move in and out of the education space. And the other piece is evidence. You know, what kind of evidence does a candidate put on the table, put in their application to demonstrate impact at a professorial level in education?
Yeah.
And I think those are conversations that need to happen around the institution. You need to have role models, you need to have case studies, because I think what a lot of institutions do is they institute these kind of pathways to full professorship on education and find that nobody applies, and find that those that do apply really become isolated and feel that it's a low status option that they can't get out of.
It's a close call, as you can notice. Are you surprised?
Well, I think I actually disagree with what you said to some extent. It's just my opinion, but I feel like if you are teaching at a university, you need to have had some experience at research, even if you're not actively in research anymore. But other than that, I mean, you should absolutely be awarded for your educational skills. But there is the danger that this kind of professorship might be looked upon as less than a professor who does research as well, and that's something that shouldn't be.
It's full professor, eh?
Right. Even then, I think you know that they're teaching professors and research professors, right? And this shouldn't be the case. They should be seen as equal.
Michael?
I would say that it should be exceptional, that there is a societal expectation that a professor conducts both elements of the mission of the universities, In fact, I don't believe that you can be a good educator unless you are conducting some form of research, particularly actually, research on your own educational practice. So if you are saying to me that you are going to make a full professor of an educationalist, it will be on the basis of their educational skills, but also the evidence they have of being reflective and engaging in research into their own practices.
You don't?
I would say,
have anything to add?
I would say 70-30 or something like that. Let people be educators for 70% of their time, and for 30% of their time, let them do research, but don't pressure them too much on the research side. Just let them be inspired through research, and that will help their educational business, I think.
Okay. Thank you, panelists. No, sorry, we're out of time, and we are out of time, but I hope you have now a lot of inspiration for the sessions this afternoon, because what we noticed that we have to solve a lot and create or invent new criteria for a new assessment system. That's what you're going to talk about this afternoon, and I hope to see you back at the plenary session in the end. And then we also have our Minister of Education and Science in the afternoon. So thank you and have a very good lunch.